Today we're going to talk about something that is probably nothing new to a lot of people. It's using a drill to start a small engine. You choose a socket that fits your nut on your flywheel, and then adapt an adapter to put this into a drill and start the engine using the drill. Okay, this is nothing new, but this has an inherent problem in that once the engine fires, it can easily just twist the drill in your hand and actually end up breaking your hand or wrist or something, because the engine may spin the drill fast enough that you cannot get it off the flywheel nut fast enough, and it will spin the drill in your hand and cause a lot of damage. There's a channel called Steve's Small Engine Saloon. He talked about this very thing, how he did this, and basically ended up hurting himself. Fortunately, it was not bad. That's a great channel. Yeah, Steve's got a lot of good information. But he kind of learned the hard way, don't do this. So what he ended up doing was buying a ratcheting adapter, and these are relatively cheap. You can buy them in 3/8 or ½ inch. I'm happen to be using the 3/8 for here. So by inserting that into the configuration, okay, so now you can choose if you want to go clockwise, or in this case here, I want to go counterclockwise. See, it won't go clockwise. Okay, but let's turn this back to clockwise, which is going to be in this direction. Okay, so now it'll go clockwise. Oops. Okay, clockwise, but it will not go counterclockwise. Okay, so that's the whole idea of this. Now, there is a problem that we have discovered. I'll give you the backstory on this, but first of all, let me point out, you see that center position right there? That locks it up, locks up the ratchet to where it will not ratchet in either direction. So it's as if this ratcheting adapter is no longer ratcheting because it's locked up. And I happen to be using the 3/8 ratcheting adapter. They also make these in ½ inch if you want to buy that, but you've got the same problem. You have clockwise. Let's see if I can get this. Okay, you have clockwise, lock, and counterclockwise. And so the backstory on this is my neighbor hurt his shoulder, and he could no longer start his weed eater. It's a 2-cycle weed eater, and so I suggested that he try something like this. And so he bought a ratcheting adapter. His uses he used a 13 millimeter socket, which I happen to have here, and he got the ratcheting adapter, put it in his drill, and using the cordless drill, which this is a cordless drill, we were able to turn the engine over, and it turned the engine over just fine, but it was not turning it fast enough to start. It would occasionally fire, but it just would not run. So what we decided is his drill was going too slow for that engine. And these cordless drills typically run around 1700 RPM, give or take. And so we got his corded drill out and put this in his corded drill, and it spun the engine fast enough to start it. But we immediately noticed a problem. Is once the engine fired, well, I was doing it at first, okay? And I noticed once the engine fired and I looked at this, it was no longer in the clockwise direction. It had, this collar had turned to the lock position. So now this was no longer ratcheting at all. It was locked. And if I had left the socket on the nut on the flywheel for very long, it would have twisted my hand. Now, in what I was doing, I did not have the choke on, and so when the engine started, the idle speed of the engine was fairly close to the drill speed, and I wasn't noticing, and I didn't feel any kickback in my wrist when this thing locked up. But it was repeatable over and over again. Every time I attempted that, and the engine did fire once or twice, and I'd take the drill off and look at it, this would be in the lock position. So we had a problem. Okay, before we go any further here, let's look at a few things. First of all, here's the Steve Small Engine Saloon videos that I mentioned earlier. Here's the first video he made where he said he almost broke his wrist. Now, he was not using the ratcheting adapter at that time. Now, he made a follow-up video where he indicates that you definitely need to use a ratcheting adapter. So check out his channel. He's got some really good videos over there. Not only these two videos, but a lot of other good videos. So it's a very good channel. So here's the ratcheting adapter that I purchased. They were about $8 when I bought them. Now they've gone up to 11, but they go on sale from time to time. But still, even if you had to spend $11, $15, or $20, it's better than breaking your wrist. Here's the weed eater that my neighbor has. It's a Stihl KM131R. There's several versions very similar to this, but this is the one that he happens to have. Here's his original pull start. We left it intact so that he could put it back on later if he wants to. And we bought just a knockoff replacement off of Amazon. This is a typical one here, right, and not very expensive. So just removed the pull rope and recoil assembly from it. And what we're trying to get to is this nut right here. This nut holds the flywheel on to the crankshaft right here. So this is 13 millimeter. Here's an actual photo of the flywheel, but the nut you're trying to turn is this one right here to start the engine. And here is the adapter, ratcheting adapter, inserted into the weed eater. Again, we just drilled out the existing recoil in this knockoff recoil assembly, and that way the socket could reach the crankshaft nut. A few safety notes I'd like to mention here are: keep the drill running. Don't take your finger off the trigger while you're starting these engines. keep it running. That's less chance of any sort of kickback. Also, if you're using a drill with a clutch torque setting, use it in the highest setting that it works. Now, you may have to go to the drill setting, but if you use it in the clutch mode, you're adding another safety layer there if you can do it. And obviously best to not use a corded drill unless you have to. Now in this case we had to because the RPM of his cordless drill was not sufficient, but if you can get by without using a corded drill, do so, because should the drill twist in your hand, that's one less thing you're going to get all wound up in, is that cord. So try to use a cordless drill if it works for you. All right, so let's get back to modifying this ratcheting assembly to make it safe. Okay. Now, inside this assembly, there's it's a number 3 Allen screw that holds this together. You could also, if you don't have a number 3 Allen, a 1/8 inch Allen will take it out. Now there's also some of these that have perhaps a Phillips head screw or a Torx screw. It just depends on the brand, but this particular brand has an Allen screw. Okay, and here it is. All right, hopefully you can see that. Okay. Now then, we're going to pull this guy apart. I'm going to hold on to the bottom, the collar in the bottom part. All right, so here's what it looks like inside. Okay, and then here is the 2 prawls that switch it from clockwise to counterclockwise. So right now it's in the lock position, and then if I turn it this way, okay, that's the clockwise position. Okay, and then again lock position, and then the counterclockwise position. All right, so what we want to do is we want to make sure it stays in the clockwise position. And to do that, okay, we're going to put it back in the lock position, the center position. And then we're going to pull this collar off of here. Now, in here there's a ball bearing that has a spring under it. So you want to make sure that thing doesn't go flying across the room. So we're going to bring the collar up and hopefully not lose that bearing. All right, there we go. All right, so we're just left with that, and we don't need to go any further with this. Leave it there. Okay, so now we're going to take a little bit of JB Weld. Doesn't take a lot. I think my JB Weld's getting a little old. I've had that for a while. Okay. Mix it up. I don't think I like the color of that. I'm going to add a little bit more black. It should come out a dark gray. Use about that much. There we go. Liking that a whole lot better. Okay. So I'm going to take and put some on the inside of this collar. I'm putting it where there is you can see I'm not putting any right there. Okay. And if you like, you can put a little bit of grease in here if you think you need it. I don't think it's necessary because the grease may end up attracting dirt, and so that might not be a good thing to have happen. All right, we're going to slide this guy back on here. All right, here's where the spring and the ball bearing goes. That lines up with the center position here. Like that. Okay. Then in goes the spring and the ball bearing. If you did happen to lose the ball bearing, really not going to matter because this is going to be permanently locked in position anyway. Okay. And wipe off any excess, or as much of the excess as I can. Okay. And we're going to slide this on here. Now notice there is some JB Weld on here. Talk about that in a second. Okay. Get this guy back together. Oh, I need to put it back into the center position, which is the lock position. Okay, there we go. Now the screw did have some Loctite on it. I'm going to put Loctite back on it. Just a little bit. Don't need a whole lot. All right. Again, going to wipe off the excess. Okay, so did get some extra JB Weld inside. Kind of did that on purpose to show you. All right, what you're going to do is you're going to turn this to the clockwise position, because once this sets up, this collar will no longer rotate. This collar has to rotate relative to this, to the male end of the adapter. Okay, so it will still go, it will ratchet counterclockwise, and then it's locked up clockwise. And that's exactly what we want. Okay, so with that fixed like that, regardless of how bad the engine might kick back when it starts, this thing will not slip back into its locked position. Again, the locked position has got it locked both ways, which you do not want. You want it in the clockwise position in our case, because our engines turn clockwise to start. Okay, so now regarding the extra, a little bit of JB Weld that got inside this, it's not a big deal. It was very little, and if you'll come and turn this occasionally while this JB Weld is setting up, like every 5 minutes or so, it will not get this thing locked into position. And the other thing too is I think it helps if you stand this up so that the JB Weld does not run down inside sideways and get into even more locations that you don't want it. But with this fixed up this way, I think it's very, very safe. Again, if you do this, first of all, I'm not responsible for what you may or may not try. I'm showing you what worked for my neighbor and I. And if you want to give it a try, do it. If you hurt yourself, well, you did something wrong. Okay, so clockwise, it works. Counterclockwise, it ratchets. Okay. All right. So again, I'm just going to let this sit like this up on the end, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to turn that every few minutes to make sure that epoxy that's inside it doesn't lock it up. Now, if it happens to do it, you can probably get out of it by getting a 3/4 inch wrench and putting this end in maybe a vise or hold it with a just adjustable wrench, something like that, and then turn it counterclockwise. Okay? Shouldn't happen if you come in for a few minutes and turn this for at least several hours. I would let this sit for 24 hours before you try to use it, but for the first 3 or 4 hours, and also you can save your sample here, or not your sample, but the board that you mixed this up on, so you can actually tell when this is getting hard, and that'll tell you how it's getting, how hard it's getting inside the ratcheting assembly. But yeah, give that a try. Hope it works for you, and be safe.